I'm John Levy, and it is my distinct honor to continue to serve as the 10th chair of the board of the Legal Services Corporation. On behalf of my extraordinary colleagues on our bipartisan, really nonpartisan LSC board, I want to welcome you to this very special luncheon and forum on expanding access to justice. Well, since 2012, when the inaugural event of this kind was held at the White House, we've convened at least 4 of these forums on access to justice each year, most in conjunction with these kind of national quarterly meetings. But during the pandemic, we continued, even increased our forums virtually. This is the very first in-person forum since COVID outside of Washington, and here it is in my hometown. Our board was last here in 2011. We have an impressive program today, and this is something we've also learned from the virtual. We've got a lot of recorded remarks, because when folks say, well, you know what, I'm going to be out of town at the governor's conference or whatever, but I want to send remarks. Well, okay, we're going to make that happen. And we'll be delighted. So we're hearing from Governor Pritzker, Mayor Lightfoot, Senator Durbin, Congressman LaHood, and Congressman Quigley. They all wanted to be here. But you know, this is the middle of the week. Congress is in session. The governors are meeting in Maine, so that's what we're going to do. We're also privileged, though, to hear in-person remarks from the Dean of the University of Chicago Law School, Tom Miles, and LSC's outstanding president, where are you, Ron Flagg? Dean Hari Osofsky of Northwestern's Pritzker School of Law will also provide, she was going to be in person, she's ill, and will provide recorded remarks. We have 2 great panels. The first, examining the importance of civil legal aid to American business, with general counsel from a variety of companies here in our Midwest. The second discusses innovative ways to address the mounting challenges and insecurities in housing affecting low-income Americans in Chicago and elsewhere in the country, with leaders from the judicial and civil legal aid communities. Well, we gather here on the doorstep of LSC's 50th anniversary in 2024. And just a few months after the release of LSC's very compelling 2022 Justice Gap Report, which illustrates just how much work remains to be done. The Justice Gap Study, LSC's second in 5 years, produced with the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago and others, uses updated, improved methodology, providing a fresh assessment of low-income American civil legal needs and the extent to which these needs are met or, more significantly, not met. The report found that low-income Americans do not get any or enough legal help for 92% of their substantial civil legal problems. 92%. This is alarming. It is unacceptable, a tremendous injustice for low-income Americans and a daunting challenge to the work of LSC and its grantees. The report, for example, found that the 132 legal aid organizations funded by LSC do not have the resources to meet the demand in communities they serve, turning away half of the requests they receive. And even when these grantees can provide some assistance, they only have the resources to fully resolve only slightly more than half of them. Well, chronic underfunding of LSC has helped fuel this crisis. In 1994, fiscal year 1994, 28 years ago, Congress appropriated $400 million for LSC. You know what it is today? $489 million. That's not remotely enough to keep up with inflation, much less the increased demand, population growth, resulting issues, recessions, pandemics that have occurred over the last 3 decades. If you just adjusted that for inflation, we would be $900 million in 2022 dollars. And that's why for fiscal year 2023, LSC has requested $1.26 billion in funding from Congress. In addition to seeking this essential funding from Congress, LSC is also pursuing a number of initiatives to narrow the justice gap. Several weeks ago, we announced we had awarded $38 million in grants to 19 civil legal aid organizations in regions impacted by hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, floods, and storms that occurred in 2020 and 2021. And we've impaneled a housing task force supported by the Wachtell firm to complement an ongoing LSC study examining how varying state and local laws affect eviction outcomes. And that eviction study will be completed later this year. This past December, LSC launched a task force focused on the challenges of delivering legal aid to low-income populations in rural communities. Ascendium Education Group and the Quarles and Brady law firm are supporting this initiative. LSC's highly effective annual initiatives also continue. Our Technology Initiative Grants, Pro Bono Innovation Fund, the Innovations in Technology Conference, and our Loan Repayment Assistance Program for lawyers at our grantees continue and make a huge difference for so many across our country. But forums like this help to raise public awareness of the crisis in civil legal aid, as does our increasingly popular podcast, which I hope you all will be listening to, Talk Justice. These efforts to narrow the justice gap need to be doubled or tripled because they address a threat to a pillar of our democracy, the rule of law. As two leaders from both sides of the aisle with strong ties to our Chicago community observed more than 50 years ago, Sergeant Shriver, while serving as the first director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, said at the ABA's annual meeting here in 1964, and I quote him, "The extension of legal services to the poor is only a means of a more universal end, one we both share, the establishment of the rule of law." He added, "It is that ordered quest for dignity, for justice, and for opportunity, which is the central concern of society today." And then, just a few years later, the first Republican director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, who actually helped to convince President Nixon to establish the corporation which we are today, Don Rumsfeld, echoed these very sentiments in testimony before Congress, and I quote him, "We cannot expect for the rule of law if we as public officials do not assure access in the legal process. To fail to do so would break faith with those Americans, rich and poor alike, who have confidence in our legal institutions and the notion that disputes are better resolved in courtrooms than on street corners," unquote. Well, this alarm, sounded more than 5 decades ago, has sadly yet to be fully heeded. And there are abundant signs across the country that confidence in our civil justice system is eroding. Our new Justice Gap report found that only 28% of low-income Americans, 28, believe that people like them are treated fairly in the U.S. civil legal system. That should worry us all. And as we approach the 50th of LSC and our country's 250th, we must close our nation's appalling justice gap and keep faith with our foundational value of equal access to justice. Folks, our generations are now at the plate. Will we strike out? Or will we take our turn at the plate and hit the home run that our country's civil justice system desperately needs? It's up to all of us. Well, thank you very much. And it's now my great privilege to introduce our first two speakers. During the pandemic, as I said, we came to rely on virtual appearances, and here we have a number of them today. We're tremendously honored to hear special remarks from the senior senator of our state, Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin has throughout his career been such a champion for access to justice. The senator is Majority Whip, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where he served for 20 years. He sits also on the Appropriations Committee and the Agriculture Committee. A graduate of Georgetown University Law School, we're so grateful that he took the time to send us this special video. And we also are just so grateful to him for championing throughout his distinguished career access to justice. Following Senator Durbin, we'll be privileged to hear from Representative Darren LaHood. Born and raised in Peoria, Representative LaHood serves the 18th District of Illinois. He's been a loyal supporter of LSC for many years, and prior to his election in Congress, he served in our Illinois State Senate and 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor. Congressman LaHood serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and also serves on the House Democracy Partnership. He has a law degree from John Marshall. It's my privilege to welcome both of these esteemed Illinoisans to our virtual stage. Can we roll it?
Welcome to the Legal Services Corporation Board of Directors to Chicago for your quarterly board meeting. I'm sorry I can't join you. I want to particularly thank and welcome the chairman of the LSC board, Chicago's own John Levy. He's been an unyielding advocate for providing low-income Americans with access to legal services. And I want to thank another board member, Lori Mikva, for his outstanding service to LSC and the Chicago legal community. No organization in America has done more to highlight the justice gap in our country. Your most recent report found that a staggering 92% of low-income Americans can't get adequate legal help for civil matters and no legal help at all. One of our most fundamental rights as Americans is supposed to be equal access to justice under the law. Well, we need civil legal aid services to make that access real. I know how important LSC is as the largest funder of civil legal aid organizations in the country, and I'm grateful for your support for the 3 legal aid nonprofits in our home state of Illinois. You are champions for our most vulnerable citizens. I'm well aware that LSC doesn't have all the funding you need to fill the justice gap. While there's broad bipartisan support for the work you do, the level of federal appropriations hasn't met the need. Well, I'm an ally, and I'm going to push my colleagues in the Senate to include increased funding for LSC in this next year's bill. Thanks for all the work you do on behalf of clients in Illinois and across America.
Hi, I'm Congressman Darren LaHood, and I'm proud to represent the 18th Congressional District of Illinois, which includes our state capital of Springfield, Peoria, and Quincy. I want to thank the Legal Services Corporation for asking me to join you today for their work to raise awareness and support for equal access to justice. Prior to entering Congress, I spent more than 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor and 8 years as a private lawyer practicing law. As a state prosecutor, I served as an assistant state's attorney in Cook County and Tazewell County in Illinois. As a federal prosecutor, I worked as an assistant U.S. attorney in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I served as the chief terrorism prosecutor. During my time as a law student, a prosecutor, and a private practice lawyer, I had the privilege of working with the Legal Services Corporation in Illinois, including Prairie State Legal Services and Land of Lincoln Legal Aid. I have deep appreciation and admiration for the help you provide for my constituents and people in need throughout Illinois. Your work continues to promote and provide access to the legal system for low-income Americans of all backgrounds and is needed now more than ever. I recognize that the justice gap for low-income Americans is vast and growing, and that challenges from COVID-19 have only increased the need for legal services. In my district, we represent 19 rural counties in central and west central Illinois. Our rural communities face unique legal challenges, and I appreciate the work that LSC's Rural Justice Task Force has done to help to both raise awareness about the civil legal needs of Americans living in rural communities and educate attorneys on how to best serve rural clients. The work of LSC to support rural communities is helping to change lives and provide continued access to legal representation. During my time in Congress, I have proudly supported robust federal funding for the Legal Services Corporation, and I will continue to support LSC and raise awareness about legal aid issues in Congress. I want to thank the Legal Services Corporation again for the invitation to speak, and I look forward to continuing to work with those gathered today to support equal access to justice for all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you to the senator and congressman. Well, it's now my privilege to introduce also recorded remarks from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who is currently attending the National Governors Conference in Maine. He has served as Illinois governor since 2019. Among his accomplishments in office, he's overseen the largest investment in history of the state to upgrade roads, bridges, broadband, and schools. In response to COVID, he launched the nation's largest housing assistance program, which has been helping to keep folks in their homes throughout the pandemic. Before becoming governor, he helped to found 1871, a nonprofit small business incubator, in addition to his already very successful business career. He's been a key supporter for years at Northwestern Center on Wrongful Convictions. He's degreed from Duke and from Northwestern's now Pritzker School of Law. Throughout his career, he's just been a true champion. He spoke at Legal Aid Chicago's event a few years ago. He's a true champion for access to justice. We're so grateful to him for providing these remarks. The governor of our state, J.B.
Hello, this is Governor J.B. Pritzker, and welcome to Illinois. The work of the Legal Services Corporation is more important now than ever, and no one knows that better than you. Before the pandemic, low-income Americans were already struggling to obtain legal representation in the face of eviction, domestic violence, financial exploitation, and more. COVID-19 exacerbated those challenges, making an already bad situation even worse. Most recently, your research identified that low-income Midwesterners did not receive sufficient legal help in more than 9 out of 10 cases. But your legal aid programs work tirelessly to fill that gap. Organizations like our state's very own Legal Aid Chicago, Land of Lincoln Legal Aid, and Prairie State Legal Services. And as governor, it's my goal to make sure that every Illinoisan has access to the legal services that they deserve. It's why I am signing legislation aimed at shrinking the digital divide to make it easier for underserved people to access online, virtual legal information and assistance. It's why I'm working to reduce barriers to employment, housing, and professional licenses by making it easier to expunge old arrest and conviction records. It's why, working with the General Assembly, we've enhanced protections and streamlined access to resources for those impacted by domestic and sexual violence. At the end of the day, advancing equity has always been and will always be our North Star. Your mission to increase access to justice is critical as we strive to create the equitable Illinois that I know is possible. So thank you for all that you do in service of this state and our nation. We are all better for it. I hope you enjoy the rest of today's luncheon. Here's to justice, not just for some, but for all.
We are very grateful to Governor Pritzker for his words and his longtime support of legal services. Good afternoon. My name is Father Pius Petrick. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Legal Services Corporation. Just a few months ago, I was back in Chicago for my 25th law school reunion. I still can't believe it. Half my life as a lawyer. Well, not so much practicing. And I have to say, Dean Miles, who is our first live speaker of the evening, was a wonderful host to us who was there, and he's been a number of years there as dean of the law school. And unprompted for me, I will say, as part of his presentation, he made very clear the commitment of the law school to serving the poor in legal issues, not just with the clinics, but what I think is just as important, but inculcating a sense of virtue, a sense of importance to the young students there about doing pro bono work as lawyers, their duty in serving their community. And I think Dean Miles and the University of Chicago have really taken a lead role in making sure that that is a part of that law school education. Dean Miles, other than sort of helping us with these sorts of things, does have a J job. He's the Clifton Musser Professor of Law and Economics at the law school at the University of Chicago. He's also dean. He works especially, he's a leading scholar on criminal justice and judicial behavior, and been widely published in a number of economic and legal journals. And if you're looking for things to do, just pull them up and read them. You'll have a blast. He joined the law school faculty in 2005. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Chicago, which is quite impressive. His JD from Harvard Law School, nobody's perfect. And on graduation, he served as a law clerk to the Honorable Jay Bybee of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. It is my great pleasure to introduce someone I've gotten to know over the years in my many visits back to the University of Chicago, Dean Miles.
Thank you very much, Father Pius. It's always a humbling thing to be introduced by a distinguished graduate of our law school. It's especially so when that distinguished graduate is a priest. If you'd like to come and introduce me at the beginning of every faculty meeting, you'd be more than welcome. It is most humbling to really be part of this event and to be part of the work of Legal Services Corporation. As we began to hear through the remarks from John and from our elected officials, increasing access to justice is a vitally important priority for our legal system and for our country. Now, as a law school dean, I see many of the students who are inspired to come to law school and to become lawyers because they aspire to help people in need obtain justice. Now, for all our students, as they progress through their legal education, they learn the importance of access to justice, the importance of people receiving legal advice in their times of needs. And the students learn that this importance has multiple dimensions. First and foremost, legal expertise makes an enormous difference in the lives of individuals. Students learn that legal advice can be the difference as to whether a consumer dispute is resolved, whether a person receives health care or not, whether a person will receive income support, whether they will receive the benefits to which they are legally entitled, and so much more. The impact of legal assistance on an individual's life can literally change the course of their life. And from the perspective of the legal system, access to legal assistance can be the difference into whether our legal processes are fair. A process in which one side has access to legal expertise and the other does not is almost by definition lopsided. In such a situation may have a veneer of fairness, but one may, to put it mildly, question whether in a deeper way it is meaningfully fair. And also, when one party has access to legal assistance and the other does not, it surely has an impact on the likelihood of reaching a correct legal decision. As John mentioned, and as the other speakers have mentioned, the incredible Justice Gap study that was released this spring One of the striking features that John mentioned in this study is that it showed that low-income persons are less likely to believe that the civil legal system can be used to protect and enforce their rights. This is a shocking finding. It should trouble us deeply. It's vitally important for all people to have faith in our legal system and to believe that the legal system can deliver justice for everyone. It's also vitally important for the next generation of lawyers, today's law students, to understand all of this. And at the University of Chicago, we seek to impart to our students the importance of providing legal assistance to those in need. We're very proud of our graduates who become legal aid lawyers. We're proud of our graduates who help legal aid in other ways. It's wonderful that several of our graduates are here in this room who do this important work. But the state of the civil justice system today, and whether there is access to justice for all, is the responsibility of everyone in the legal profession. We teach that for our students to understand that. As Father Pius mentioned, we do that in our law clinics, and about 75% of each graduating class now has participated in one of our outstanding law clinics. And we teach this in other ways. We teach it through our pro bono service initiative, and this challenges our students to volunteer and provide legal services even as law students. This past year, the graduating class provided collectively over 15,000 hours of volunteer legal service, and this is in keeping with the totals that have been reached in recent years. At the University of Chicago, we like to say that our missions are transformative legal education and pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Our faculty seek to understand our legal system, its strengths, its deficiencies, and how it can be made better. From this perspective, the recent Justice Gap survey and study is a very special contribution. That study compellingly documents the magnitude and prevalence of legal aid need, the disparity across income groups in securing help for those legal needs, and in the shortage of resources to meet those needs, and as I just mentioned, the disparity in belief about the fairness of our legal system. It's vitally important for every law student to understand this, and I believe that every law student should read the Justice Gap study. As we hear today about the important work of LSC and its grantees, I hope that our law school and every law school in this country are graduating a generation of students, a future generation of lawyers who are dedicated in a very personal way to equal justice under law. I thank John for the opportunity to speak today. Congratulations to the LSC team and the board on their great work, and to the grantees here in Illinois. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Ron Flagg, president of LSC. Tom Miles, thank you so much. With a justice gap where 92% of the problems faced by low-income Americans are met with inadequate or no assistance, it is clear that we need all hands on deck, as John Levy would say, and important in that cadre of people providing assistance are our law schools, who are not only already a reservoir of great talent, but are training future generations of lawyers to tackle the justice gap. One advantage of the virtual world was if we had a panel, we just pressed a button and they appeared here in live. We had to actually walk to the podium, but here we are. Welcome all of you, and I'll stand for a moment and then I'll sit down. Let me introduce my four distinguished colleagues, starting with the far end of the podium. Jesse Ruiz is Partner General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer of Vistria, a private investment firm focused on healthcare, education, and financial services. Prior to joining Vistria, Jesse served as Deputy Governor for Education in the office of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, where Jesse oversaw the state's education system from early childhood through higher education. He was also a partner in the corporate and securities group of Drinker, Biddle, and Reith. Next to Jesse is Susan Levy, the Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Northern Trust, a leading provider of wealth management, asset servicing, and management and banking to corporations, institutions, affluent families, and individuals. Susan oversees a legal department consisting of more than 117 employees across the globe. Previously, Susan was managing partner of the law firm Jenner & Block. Next to Susan is Margaret Egan, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of Hyatt Hotels Corporation. In this role, Margaret is responsible for Hyatt's global legal and corporate services. Prior to entering the hospitality industry, Margaret practiced law in DLA Piper Chicago Litigation Group and served as an attorney advisor with the U.S. Department of Justice in London. That sounds like a pretty good gig.
It was a great gig.
And sitting next to me, and I'll be sitting next to her in a moment, is Jamie Claire Flaherty, who currently serves as Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for the Barack Obama Foundation. Jamie Claire led the years-long, and I know John Levy's familiar with this, the years-long federal regulatory process for the Obama Presidential Center, working to bring the center and long-needed infrastructure improvements to the south side of Chicago. Previously, Jamie Claire worked as Vice President and Chief of Staff at REL Investments and practiced white-collar and commercial litigation. So thanks to all of you, and welcome. I'm host here, you're the guests, and it's probably a bit impertinent and unusual, but I'm actually going to ask you, notwithstanding our functions, why are you here? And by that I mean, we're thinking about the justice gap. We're thinking about the need to have unexpected messengers to carry the message about the justice gap and the role civil legal aid plays. But American business, why does access to justice matter to you and to your business? And Susan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And John, that's really why I'm here, because you invited me, and you're hard to say no to. But just a little bit about me. I was at Jenner & Block for 32 years, and then 8 years ago, I became the General Counsel of Northern Trust. For those of you who don't know Northern Trust, we're the largest bank in Illinois, and we are one of the 3 largest trust banks. And one thing about the trust banks are they're really old. The oldest trust bank is Bank of New York, founded by Alexander Hamilton in the late 1700s. 8 years later, the State Street Bank was founded, and we are the newbie, founded in 1889. So why is access to justice important? Even though I'm now in-house, and before that I was at a law firm, I've always felt very strongly that I'm an officer of the court, and that's something I'm very proud of. And one of my responsibilities of being an officer of the court is professional responsibility, following the Code of Professional Ethics, and also providing legal services to those who can't pay. And so when this was important to me at Jenner & Block, which is one of the reasons I went there 40 years ago, and they were even a major pro bono firm back then. And when I was managing partner, a big chunk of our revenue went to pro bono services, and that's something we were always proud of. My clients at Northern Trust now, which are all of the 21,000 people who work there, have access to justice. We've got a great legal department, and we have access to the best, firms in the country. However, we also believe that it's very important to support the communities where we work and live. And this is part of our ESG and sustainability efforts, which includes the long-term well-being of our employees, our shareholders, our clients, and our communities. So supporting our communities means supporting the legal services that for the underserved in those communities too.
Thank you, Susan. Jesse, what are your thoughts?
Your question reminded me as a first-year law student going to the Seventh Circuit for the very first time and watching these lawyers argue a brief that we had done as part of our writing program, and Judge Posner having his back to them, and this one lawyer arguing his heart out and Judge Posner then turning around and finally saying, "Counsel, why are you here?" And he's like, "You've been arguing and arguing, and you haven't even told me why you're here." And I just mental note, I'm like, always be able to answer that question. I have an answer to your question, and that is both personal and professional. Personal being that as a son of Mexican immigrants and one who, when he came here, was undocumented. My father was undocumented in Chicago for 7 years, from 1947, 48 to 55. Worked all over the place, helped construct the Prudential building. And at the time, there was a path for him to finally get legal residency and then, 40 years later in 1995, become a citizen of this country. There was access to justice for them for basic things so that they could buy a home eventually, and so that I could have opportunities this guy with a third grade education could only dream about. And so it's always been an obligation on my part in going to law school that I was going to use my law degree to not only provide for my family, but provide for my community and pay it back. And that's an obligation we all take to, as I recall, when I took my oath, almost 27 years ago, and I was licensed as an Illinois lawyer to do just that. And so that is my personal reason. My professional reason is because fortunately I work for an organization that realizes it is a business imperative, that if our communities aren't doing well, we're not going to do well. That yes, we believe in capitalism, but it could use some tweaking. And if it's not serving everybody, it's not going to serve us. And so we can't prosper if everybody isn't prospering with us. And so making sure that there's educational opportunities, that there's opportunities, career, all of those are incumbent at times to access to justice and equitable access to justice, so that we can all have a level playing field. And we're not naive. We know that there is not currently a level playing field, as we see in way too many instances today play out, and exacerbated in too many examples in recent news. And so we're very cognizant of our role in how we invest in the companies we invest in and what they're doing in their communities, and how we leverage the resources of our various funds to do just that.
Thank you, Jesse. Margaret?
All right, thank you. Well, first, thank you for having me. So I am here because you invited me, but I'm really, really thrilled to be in a group of people who collectively are doing so much good for society. So thanks to all of you. I think we're all so fortunate to be in leadership positions in our respective organizations and having access to, the legal services that we need to represent the companies, the organizations we work for. And I don't lose sleep at night over our legal positions for our company. It's not that I don't worry about it. Don't think that I take it lightly, but I work for a purpose-driven, ethical company. We have access to the best legal services that we need at any time. And there's a sense that you can find your way through what many people see as a really Byzantine legal system. And you can forget sometimes that those legal services, that's a portion of what the legal system is about, but it's really about people going to court, dealing with foreclosures and custody cases and all the other things that happen that are it's scary for people, right? They don't know what they're up against. And when I hear the statistics about how people feel like the system is stacked against them, in particular in lower income areas, it really gets you. And you want all of these best lawyers that I have around me in my legal department. I have a fantastic legal department. And we have great lawyers that we work with at our law firms. And you want that level of passion and talent brought to bear for everybody who needs it in the legal system. I started my career, I'll start in law school, working with the local defender's office. I went to a school outside of a big metropolitan area, and it was eye-opening. And then I joined DLA Piper, and as a second year, the Illinois Appellate Defender's Office reached out to a number of law firms in Chicago and said, we're backed up. Would you just take some of our cases? So my firm took like 15 cases, and they were literally just files on a table. And I walked in and I pulled a file out. And it turned out to be a life-changing case. And I hope that everybody in their career has, one life-changing case like that, where as a second year, I did the research. I had the opportunity to argue at the appellate court level, which is, super exciting. And we reversed, I get emotional every time I talk about this. We reversed somebody's conviction, murder conviction. When I took that file and opened it up and read it through, I knew that my client wasn't a Boy Scout, but also I didn't think was guilty of the crime that he'd been convicted of. And hearing the fear in his voice and the not understanding the system and thinking it was stacked against him, and he had the forces of a large law firm to support him to reverse his 65-year conviction. People ask me, what's the best thing you've ever worked on? I've worked on a lot of great things. I've done, that London gig was super fun, by the way. A lot of fun things, but nothing. I don't think anything I'll ever do will feel as good as that one case. And so that's what I take with me, and that's what I talk about in my department. And, the lawyers in my department we're putting together, reestablishing our own pro bono efforts now. They got a little bit sidelined in the last couple of years, but we're tying it into the broader efforts that Hyatt is doing to make a difference in the communities in which we operate. So for me, I think my law school dean said, whether you're a corporate lawyer or or you go into social services, whatever you do the right thing, make a difference, and do the right thing. And so that's what we're here to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Before I came to LSC, I was pro bono partner or chair of the pro bono committee at Sidley for over 20 years. And I can't tell you the number of lawyers throughout the country who would tell me that over the course of their 20, 30, 40 years of practice, similar to Margaret, the most significant, memorable, feel-good case for them of all time was a pro bono case, whether it was criminal or civil. People can make a difference, and I bet the company case doesn't have to involve a company. It can involve a family. Jamie Claire, aside from being invited, why are you here?
Because it all points back to Levy. But I, very similar to you, Jesse, I'm a daughter of a mother who was raised in the heart of Jim Crow South in Louisiana in the 1940s, and a dad who grew up here in Chicago in the Great Depression. My mom famously says, I used to march with Rat Brown, and she means it. And I just grew up knowing that justice and equity were part and parcel of who you are and what you do in your community. Ultimately led me to pursue a legal education at the University of Michigan. Go Blue. We've got the Wolverines here in the house. And it led me to where I am today. So at the Obama Foundation, our actual mission is to inspire, empower, and connect people to make change in their worlds. And what better way to use the platform that we have? So it's a huge, tremendous responsibility, but it's at the heart of what we do.
Thank you. Margaret, you were one of over 160 corporate general counsel to sign a letter to Congress requesting significantly increased funding for LSC for FY 2023. And first of all, thank you. And thank you to all of you who signed that letter. It makes an enormous difference. Again, unexpected messengers are really important. Members of Congress expect John Levy and Ron Flagg to ask them for more money. But when Hyatt asks for more money on behalf of LSC, that makes a difference. So why was it important to Hyatt to be on that letter?
Well, these are funny times we live in, right? And I think the role of corporate America is more and more important in stepping into social issues and stepping into issues around justice. And I think with everything that's been going on in our political climate in the last several years, I think that role, we see our role as heightened, we at Hyatt. And so we've taken certain steps and been very clear publicly on some things that we might not have been as vocal about 10 years ago. And I'm actually really proud to lead those efforts. And so with the letter comes to me, I'm like, of course I'm going to sign that letter. I believe in it. And I believe in the organization. And so that's an easy ask, frankly, to do that. But we've taken positions now on hate groups. We're not going to allow hate groups to speak in our hotels. We don't want our colleagues to be like at a hotel like this, standing in the room and listening to someone spew hate speech. So that's unusual, right? And I actually got some flack from some of our competitors about that, but we believe in it. And I think that's important as a purpose-driven organization, and our purpose is to care for people so they can be their best. You can't do that and you're paying lip service to that if you're not stepping out and in front of some of these issues. And so we're first and foremost thinking about our colleagues and our guests and all the other people who are in our sort of value chain, but first and foremost, our colleagues. So thank you for asking me to sign the letter too.
Jesse, Vistria's focus is achieving financial returns and positive social change in America. What do you see as the connection between business, the rule of law, and the ability of low-income people to access the civil justice system?
I'm gonna cheat a little bit and borrow a quote that one of our co-founders and co-CEOs, Marty Nesbitt, wrote in an op-ed, and quoting, "Our investment philosophy is predicated on the reality that is, if you sell a product, good, or service in America, you rely on a functioning and thriving society to do so. A strong and stable society is the golden goose we must protect and invest in. The golden egg is the opportunity for every American to pursue a higher standard of living and quality of life on a level playing field. Business efforts to positively impact society aren't a nice to have, they are a must have. It is the foundation of value creation, and it also happens to be the right thing to do." End quote. And I'll take it one further, that a thriving society requires a justice system that provides access to justice for all with integrity and fidelity to the rule of law and seeking justice for everyone. Thus, it's an integral part of a functioning and thriving society that all businesses need to prosper. We recognize that, it's in our self-interest to do that. And sometimes self-interest is a good thing. And in this one, recognizing that is important. And so gladly, our CEOs and our culture reinforces that. Our associates and principals and vice presidents and other partners all get that, and everybody walks the talk. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I have colleagues who are like-minded and understand this and are enlightened enough to realize it is in their self-interest. But it's got to be a mission that we all undertake.
Thank you. Susan, you have a long-standing personal commitment to pro bono throughout your career, and your company, Northern Trust, views corporate social responsibility and philanthropy as essential elements of its mission and culture. Why is it important that your colleagues engage in pro bono work as you have done throughout your career? And what do you say to other corporate attorneys in particular who want to help but are nervous about taking cases outside their comfort zone and expertise?
Well, as I mentioned, sustainability and supporting our communities is key. We consider our communities a key stakeholder. And so therefore, it is important for corporations and corporate attorneys to support the underserved in their communities through pro bono work and other ways. And so you asked a question about doing pro bono work in-house, and we try to do it. We do it as much as we can. It's not easy. It's not as easy as it was when you're at one of the law firms. And one reason is because we don't really do training. I mean, we only hire lawyers who are 15 years out, who have a specialty already, so we don't really do training. But the best way to do pro bono work in-house, we found, is to partner with one of our law firms. And the law firms provide the training, the expertise, and the oversight. And they also provide, we have a lot of transactional lawyers, and that's always been challenging to find pro bono work. The law firms have provided that. And we found that it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the pro bono organizations, which get the service. It's a win for my lawyers who can do pro bono work, which they want. And for an outside law firm, it's a great networking opportunity. And they usually follow up with paying work, which the law firms like. A second way that we contribute in-house is by just through charitable contributions. Northern Trust gave over $200 million last year to underserved communities through community investments and provided about $18 million in charitable grants, including supporting nearly 1,000 charitable organizations. And we focus on food, healthcare, education, and all of those services also include pro bono services. So I've seen many organizations in this room today. We've been supporting them, and that's something we're really proud of.
Thank you. Jamie Claire, we're still in the pandemic, although we'd like to put it behind us, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the impact of the pandemic over the last couple of years, which has really exacerbated the access to justice barriers that existed before and the racial disparities that have existed long before. What's your perspective on access to justice and the impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, as I sit here with my mask in my lap. I think what we realized at the Obama Foundation, like so many of you and probably my co-panelists here on the stage, we're not just in a health pandemic, we're also facing a racial pandemic. And I will not forget the conversations we had very quickly internally in 2020 about what we could do. Because it wasn't enough to sit passively by and watch, the Black Lives Matter protest. And so we created an effort called Anguish to Action. It lived online, it lived in streets, it lived in communities across the country, across the globe, where we allowed, where we've cultivated resources for people to find ways to actually, encourage reform. We collected great research around police reform and what's already being done and how you can take action today. That's the kind of tangible thing that you have to do if you've got a name like the Obama Foundation on the door. I will also not forget the conversation that President Obama had with Congressman Lewis just before he passed away in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Brian Stevenson, Congressman Lewis, President Obama on this call, and with members of our My Brother's Keeper community, which if you don't know about My Brother's Keeper, please check it out. It's the kind of conversations that you're not hearing enough of. And those are the things that spark action. And everything, I understand Obama engenders the idea of hope. But here, I think at the foundation, we're very cognizant that there has to be action behind the hope. We need to find tangible pathways to create that kind of positive change in our communities.
Well, thank you. That's actually a perfect segue to my last question, which is messaging and action. And so I'd like to ask each of you if you had a single message to share with other business leaders or your employees or your customers or other stakeholders who are important to you, what would you tell them about the legal needs of low-income people and how we could best serve them? And Margaret, why don't we start with you?
It's not a hard conversation right now, I would say, certainly at my organization, and it sounds like everybody's, because our eyes have been opened in a way, particularly since the murder of George Floyd, and the getting our thinking straight on, okay, we were a great company and we have great DE&I efforts, but what are we doing? Like, are we moving the needle? Are we making things happen? And so we focused our attention on a program we call Change Starts Here at Hyatt, and it's focused on supporting communities, finding minority-owned businesses to partner with, and on who we employ, retain, and develop as colleagues at Hyatt. And through those efforts, we're really focusing on opportunity youth. And we had been doing that already, but now we have a different kind of focus on it. And it's a conversation we're having regularly. Our philanthropic efforts are focused on it. So we have an organization or a platform we call Rise High, and it works with local communities to provide job opportunity, job training to opportunity youth. And we have set goals for ourselves that from those programs, we're going to be hiring 45% of the people who come through those programs at our hotels in the various communities in which we operate. So for me, it's an easy thing to say, and you understand that the legal landscape, it doesn't help anybody. The people that we're trying to help, they need more than that. This is a holistic view to supporting the communities in which we operate. And I just before walking in here, I was talking to my CEO, Mark Halpamazian, tell him what I'm doing. Hey, what are you doing? And he's like, wow, that sounds great. That sounds great. Let's talk more about that. So I'm fortunate to be in an organization that is going towards all these things with great energy and with now publicly announced goals. And we want to make things happen. So for me, I say to them, everything that we're thinking about in the communities in which we operate, where we're seeing opportunity, it extends to legal services as well. So it's that's more an extension of what we're doing, I think.
Susan?
Well, as we heard earlier today, and which I firmly believe, the rule of law really makes this country great. And we don't always see it, and there's not equal access to justice, and there's not always equity in the legal system, and that's what we need. That's what we're here to do. That's what we need to fix. But it's really to maintain the rule of law.
Jamie Claire?
Start early is, I think, what we've learned. We have a program, actually, Hyatt is one of our partners, the Obama Youth Jobs Corps, and we figure you find the students who are interested in high school and ready to, find their place and give them the training that they need, the workforce development early on. And they have now tangible pathways to, not just to college, but to a career. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately gives them a seat at the table, allows them to understand their agency in creating a more equitable and just society.
Thank you. Jesse, you're our cleanup hitter.
Sure. We just, on Juneteenth, we celebrated it by doing something with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. And there are a lot of great, and we're doing something to help out folks in Highland Park and doing a number of things. But one thing I try to remind folks of is that, yes, there are a number of great needs, but a lot of them are underpinnings are legal issues, wage theft, landlord-tenant issues, employment discrimination, child support matters that are things that all of you involved in legal services do day in, day out and impact people's lives and their ability to that equitable dream we all think about. So making sure that I remind them, also remember our legal service providers as well, and also make sure that we fund some high impact litigation. Sometimes folks don't want to fund litigation, but I used to serve on the board of MALDEF, and thanks to then Professor Obama's class in law school, I learned of Plyler v. Doe that gave access to undocumented children to have a public education. But for somebody funding MALDEF to bring that case in Texas, I think 82, 83, certain kids wouldn't have the right to school. And, I think that, but for certain circumstances, my dad finally becoming legalized, I could have been one of those kids who were impacted. And so it's important that we fund these things as well.
Jamie Claire, Margaret, Susan, Jesse, thank you for being here. But far more importantly, thank you for your leadership, not just in your organizations, but in our country. That justice gap is daunting, and we need leaders like you to help narrow it. And thank you for all you're doing in that regard. Please join me in thanking our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, President Flagg, and the panelists for that inspiring discussion and for your commitment to access to justice. My name is Lori Mikva. I'm a member of the LSC Board of Directors. It's my privilege to introduce our next two speakers who will be joining us by video. First up is Congressman Mike Quigley. Representative Quigley has served his community for more than 30 years, first as a Cook County Commissioner, and now he represents the 5th District of Illinois, which includes most of the north side of Chicago and several western suburbs. He has spent 13 years in Congress fighting for causes like equal access to justice. He currently serves on the House Committee on Appropriations and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He was also appointed the Vice Chair of Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition. Representative Quigley received his BA from Roosevelt, his Master's in Public Policy from the University of Chicago, and his JD from Loyola. Following his comments, you will hear from my colleague and my boss, Harry Osofsky, the Dean of Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law. Mouthful. Dean Osofsky commenced to lead the law school, Lord bless her, last year. She's the Myron James Bradwell Professor of Law, as well as the Professor of Environmental Policy and Culture at the Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences. Dean Osofsky has a history of building legal education initiatives focusing on mentoring, technology, innovation, and diversity. Previously, she served as the president of the Association for Law, Property, and Society, and as a member of the Dean's Steering Committee of the American Association of Law Schools. Dean Osofsky received a PhD from the University of Oregon and her JD from Yale Law School. Our thanks to Dean Osofsky and Representative Quigley for sending their remarks.
Hi, it's Mike Quigley here from Illinois' 5th District, and I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. As you all know, in April of this year, the Legal Services Corporation released its Justice Gap Report. And it showed that low-income Americans face a serious justice gap, meaning their needs far exceed the resources available. This study, published by LSC, shows that this gap has gotten worse since 2017. And on the average, 92% of low-income Americans did not get enough help for a legal problem they encountered in the last year. Today, 3 in 4 of the about 50 million low-income Americans experienced at least one legal problem in the last year. As a former criminal defense attorney, I've spent a lot of my adult career fighting to ensure that everyone in our justice system has access to quality legal services. I firmly believe that low-income Americans deserve access to quality legal services. After all, equal protection under the law makes no exception for people who can't afford a good attorney. As a member of Congress, I've been committed to ensuring legal resources are available to all Americans. And I'm proud to share with you all today that my colleagues and I, who share this goal of ensuring that legal representation is available to all who need it, were able to secure an investment of $675 million for the Legal Services Corporation in the House Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2023, an increase of $186 million. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I've been dedicated to addressing the needs of low-income Americans, including by providing additional funding for housing programs and ensuring that community health centers can reach the most vulnerable. These efforts have led to increased funding for many federal programs that assist low-income Americans, and I'm proud that we've taken this step to address inequities in the legal system and invest in the Legal Services Corporation. We'll keep fighting for programs that help secure access to basic civil needs, from legal help to safe housing and much more. This year and beyond, we'll continue to fight for increased access to legal assistance and all the things that working class families need to prosper.
Good afternoon. I am Dean Hari Osofsky from Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and am honored to have been asked to join this important conversation about increasing access to justice. I had so looked forward to dialoguing with you in person about ways we might build innovatively upon our collaborations today, but unfortunately was diagnosed with COVID over the weekend and so had to pivot to a recording. I am excited to have follow-up conversations with you in the coming days and months. Northwestern Pritzker School of Law has a long-standing innovation tradition, an important part of which has been its social justice work. We are committed to building our next chapter of innovation for impact in partnership with all of you and other key stakeholders. Our commitment to social justice dates back to at least 1919, when Dean Wigmore required our law students to volunteer in Chicago Legal Services. The Bloom Legal Clinic today provides critically important access to justice for its clients in Chicago and around the world. And our Public Interest Center supports our students' extensive pro bono work, much of which is focused on access to justice. However, we all know that profound gaps remain. The latest 2002 LSC report details a gap even worse than the one in 2017, with 92% of low-income people receiving inadequate legal help for their civil legal problems. Gideon v. Wainwright has helped bridge that gap somewhat in a criminal law context, but as everyone in this room knows, much work remains. This problem exists around the world. The World Justice Project reports that more than 5.1 billion people, or approximately 2/3 of the world's population, are not getting the justice that they need for both everyday problems and severe injustices, and approximately 1.4 billion people have unmet civil or administrative justice needs. This gap is unacceptable, and these gaps occur against a backdrop of change that has only been accelerated by the past 2 years in our society. Technology, globalization, the need for cross-cutting knowledge, and the need for progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social and racial justice were already transforming the legal profession and society. The pandemic, racial justice reckoning, and depolarization has only accelerated those transitions and exacerbated inequality. We are excited at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law to partner with all of you to explore how we can build on the important work being done to innovatively bridge the access to justice gaps further. We look forward to piloting approaches that bring together people from legal services, government, law firms, corporations, and multiple law schools and universities that explore opportunities to further develop our networks of support, use technology in innovative ways, and take interdisciplinary approaches that recognize that people need support beyond legal assistance, and that some of the assistance that they need may be able to be decoupled from legal services. At Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, our Bloom Legal Clinic takes an interdisciplinary approach to providing services and includes social workers in its clinics. And our Law and Technology Initiative has been exploring, among other things, innovations in access to justice. We also have been talking with our alumni community and other external partners about how we might collaborate and innovate together. As I say to our law students as they begin law school and as they graduate, as members of the legal profession, we have a unique opportunity and responsibility to contribute to justice and make an impact. At this moment of challenge in our country and in countries around the world, this role is more important than ever. I look forward to our collaboration and welcome follow-up conversations. Thank you again for including me.
Please join me in thanking Congressman Quigley and Dean Ofesky. I'm Frank Nooner. I'm a member of the LSC board from Lafayette, Louisiana. It's my honor now to introduce Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who will be joining us via video. Mayor Lightfoot has been a determined and driven champion of equity and inclusion for the city of Chicago since her election in 2019. Prior to that, she had an extensive career in law and government. She served as senior equity partner in the litigation and conflict resolution department at Meyer Brown. She was president of the Chicago Police Board as well as chair of the Police Accountability Task Force. She has also served as Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Chicago Office of Emergency Management and Communications and is an Assistant United States Attorney. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan and the University of Chicago Law School. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Lightfoot.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and I'm pleased to be here to share how Chicago is supporting the Legal Services Corporation's mission to expand access to the civil justice system for low-income Americans. Equity and inclusion have always been core pillars of my administration. That's why I've been a proud supporter of efforts that level the playing field for those who have historically faced barriers living happy, healthy, and fulfilled lives. One such effort is the city's new Right to Counsel pilot program, which operates out of our Department of Housing. This program will provide legal representation at no cost to eligible low-income tenants at risk of or subject to eviction or lockout in Chicago. Helping renters stay safely housed and protected from unnecessary eviction is an essential part of our efforts to support our most vulnerable residents, especially during the pandemic. And speaking of our city's most vulnerable, my administration is also deeply committed to increasing resources for domestic violence survivors, many of whom do not have access to the resources they need to get justice and to begin to heal from their trauma. Last year, at my direction, my administration led a collaborative effort to co-design a first-of-its-kind strategic plan to address gender-based violence and human trafficking. This work began with the launch of a Gender-Based Violence Advisory Council and continued with the launch of the city's first-ever strategic plan to address gender-based violence and human trafficking. This plan will build the muscle across city government to understand how victimization happens and to ensure that all facets of city government can connect survivors and families to critical services such as legal aid, mental health care, housing, and more. These efforts would not have been possible without the support of organizations like Legal Services Corporation, which provides local organizations with the resources necessary to protect vulnerable residents. So thank you, Board Chair John Levy, and the entire LSC team for continuing to help those in need. I look forward to continuing to work with you all to make Chicago and this country a more equitable and inclusive place. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're batting cleanup today, guys. I'll join in the welcomes to Chicago. My name's Bob Glaves. I'm with the Chicago Bar Foundation. We've got a really good panel here, and starting on my left here with Chief Judge Timothy Evans, who's the Chief Judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County, many of you know, is one of the largest unified court systems in the whole world, and serves more than 5 million people here in Cook County. So you'll hear more from Judge Evans soon. John Gallo is the CEO and Executive Director of Legal Aid Chicago. Before joining Legal Aid Chicago in 2017, he was a partner at Sidley Austin, where he co-chaired the firm's white-collar practice group and oversaw litigation in the Chicago office. Kicked me around the courtroom a little back when I was practicing too. And we have Judge Carrie Hamilton, is a judge in the Circuit Court of Cook County in the 6th Municipal District, which there's a wide geography in Cook County beyond Chicago, and Markham is where the 6th District is, where she sits, which is a very high-volume court, and she hears evictions, among other cases down there. Prior to being a judge, she actually left to become a judge at the peak of a very distinguished career as a federal prosecutor. And then down on the end, we have Neil Steinkamp is the managing director of Stout. Many of you know Neil. Stout is a global financial advisory firm that's headquartered right here in Chicago. He consults on a range of strategic, organizational, and financial issues for government, business, and court and community leaders. Relevant to today, he's done a lot of evaluations. He's evaluating the programs you're going to hear about here in Chicago, but also all over the country. I'm going to read some of these cities just because he's evaluated eviction programs in beyond Chicago: New York, Philadelphia, LA, Baltimore, Cleveland, Detroit, Delaware, Connecticut, and there's more. So Neil knows what he's talking about. So At the Chicago Bar Foundation, we work closely with our courts and our legal aid partners and our legal community, our broader legal community here, on a lot of bigger systemic access to justice initiatives, including the eviction response here. I'm going to just give you a really quick snapshot of what eviction looked like here before the pandemic hit. It looked like this a lot of places around the country, I think. We had about 30,000 evictions filed each year, spread through in Chicago, but spread throughout suburban Cook County as well. So 6 different courthouses, multiple court calls every day. Like a lot of places, 80% of the landlords would be represented by counsel, but only about 10% of the tenants. So a big imbalance there that we rightfully focus on the tenants there. But that 20% of landlords who are not represented are also usually small landlords who are also facing big challenges. So they too are at risk in the system. We had some great legal aid through John's organization and others, and great pro bono efforts in the courts and in the community, but not nearly enough to go around. People had trouble connecting with them a lot of times when they were in need. There was high default rates. And in the suburban courts, a lot less services were available to people facing eviction. So that's our backdrop, and then COVID hits. And so we were working closely with Judge Evans, our county and city government, our legal aid partners, and other community and bar partners to look at what are we going to do here. We've got all those challenges that were already there, but we also have now a pandemic which had the courts closed at that point. So we had to figure out how to do this remotely, and came up with a really comprehensive new program, Cook County Legal Aid for Housing and Debt it's called, but the part for eviction is called the Early Resolution Program. So there's some handouts that a lot of you have on your, I hope you have somewhere on your tables that give more background, because we really don't have a lot of time to spend to give you a lot of the background. So I'm going to really go real quick through it. But what's really distinguished this, and Chief Judge Evans is going to talk about this in a minute, is the active leadership from the court from day one here. And that has really, not only have we built in a lot more legal aid resources and other resources, but really significant changes to the court process itself to help make it more fair and give people a chance to access these resources and reach an early resolution in their cases. So Judge Evans will tell you a little bit more about that, but it's all, the early phases of eviction cases are now all remotely heard, so they're remotely accessible from anywhere in the county. All the services in the program are remotely accessible, so people can get those whether they're close to court or not. Legal aid is absolutely an integral part of it, but what we've done, the mayor talked about the right to counsel pilot that the city's about to start, but what we've had in place for a while now is a more universal but more limited scope kind of right to counsel pilot, where everybody who's unrepresented, be they a tenant or a small landlord, gets access to legal aid early in the process, gets a chance to consult with them, get counsel, and get help trying to negotiate a solution early in the process to see if they can work it out. John's organization has been part of that along with others. In the packet you see there's a lot of different legal aid partners doing that. There's also community outreach, there's court-based rental assistance, mediation, so a lot of other services that are built around the legal aid to help people connect with it and help them use it early in the process where we knew people were getting lost the most before. This new right to counsel pilot the mayor mentioned in the city is going to add on to that, so that the smaller subset of people who can't work their cases out early but have really good legal defenses, or they're especially vulnerable, like people in subsidized housing, are going to get access to full representation now. And the state is making some investments, so there'll be more of those services available, that full representation in the suburbs too, beyond where this right to counsel pilot will be. So you put all this together, it's still an evolving work in progress. We're regularly working with both, the landlords and the landlords bar, as well as all the other partners here, to try to improve it as we go along. But we believe it's a combined model that has a potential to be a sustainable, equitable, and fiscally responsible way to provide legal aid to tenants and to the landlords who need it, and really make for a fairer and better system. So we're going to talk more about that and how it fits into what's going on in other parts of the country. So, Chief Judge Evans, I'm going to start with you. It's similar to the corporate question you heard, why are you here? Why is the court a lead partner in these efforts here in Cook County?
Well, it's crystal clear, and we've heard the phrase mentioned several times today, and that is there was a need to level the playing field. And that's really what this does. It gives us an opportunity, yes, to work with the County of Cook, but to do so in the court setting. And what this process does is it provides an opportunity for landlords who are unrepresented, as well as tenants, to come into the court. And it's an uncomfortable court. Evictions are not popular under any circumstance. And so people come in, they don't know exactly what to expect. And what this new system does is it gives them help the moment they come into court. We have a person whose job it is to connect them to a caseworker who will provide them over a 28-day period an opportunity to get free legal advice, mediation services, but also to help them get to the financial resources that many of them need. And with that combination, we increase the chances that these cases can be settled short of an eviction. And even if somebody has ultimately to leave a given location, they remove themselves under an agreed arrangement where there is not anything listed against their record. The new landlord doesn't hear that they were the subject of a judgment for eviction. Instead, they can move with their heads held high. But in this process, many of these cases are settled. The landlords and the tenants are satisfied, and they're able to resolve their differences. So it is leveling the playing field. Jesse talked about it a few moments ago, as many of the other speakers did. And I hope that we can extend this using the city's program so that not only can we get help for these people as they move into court, but that they can get help in court if the cases are not settled, that they can see what defenses they have, that they don't have to stay home, be embarrassed, and lose their property rights simply because they didn't have the kind of resources and access to legal help that we know everybody needs. That's what this is all about.
Thank you, Judge. And Judge Hamilton, I'm going to turn to you because you're on the front lines in the courtrooms that are hearing these cases in high volume. You see these realities every day and the devastation it can cause. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and why legal aid is so important, and if there's anything really that you're seeing different post-pandemic too?
Sure. So I've been hearing eviction cases for over 5 years, and my call right now, I have a number of other civil matters in addition to eviction matters. I can definitely say that eviction cases are right here, the unmet civil legal needs of low-income Americans. Particularly where I sit, on the portion of Cook County where I sit, it is an extremely poor area of Cook County. The vast majority of individuals who are in my courtroom are unrepresented, both landlords and tenants. The landlords are oftentimes, they own a 3-flat, they live in 1 floor, they rent out the other 2, and they've got a tenant who's in dire straits. What this means is there are a lot of emotions in the courtroom. It's not just another civil case about money. It is about someone's home, and oftentimes it's someone's home on both sides. For the tenant, it's where the school district where their kids go to school. And so the prospect of them having to move quickly is just untenable. And what we all know is that even just being brought to court on one eviction one time can have a devastating impact on an individual's ability to get out of poverty, and can also impact someone then moving into poverty. So these are, from my perspective, really unique and extremely important civil cases that do desperately need legal representation. Because by the time it gets to me, things have gone horribly off the rails. There's bad history, there's bad blood, there have been promises made and broken, usually time and time again. There is no trust. There is almost never any current communication happening. Prior to the pandemic, John's organization had one lawyer in Markham part-time, although he was really working full-time. And he really focused on representing individuals in subsidized housing, because if they get one eviction, it's a life sentence for them. They're never going to get subsidized housing again. So that was necessary. But of course, there's so many other low-income individuals who need representation as well. Pre-pandemic, if John's lawyer was on the case, I could breathe easy. I knew he was going to be able to explain things, calm things down. And usually on his own, even if the plaintiff wasn't represented, he could usually get a settlement agreement in place that everyone could live with. And we could work on trying to seal the case so it wouldn't follow the tenant around. Post-pandemic, because of ERP, obviously the involvement has expanded, but so have the evictions. So LAC has been wonderful from before and now, but the numbers are just so huge that we desperately need more people. The case managers have been great. We need more. And so, you know, for me, I experience every day where if I have a case that has a legal aid attorney, it may not get settled, but at least it's not resulting in people being even angrier, even more frustrated, even more confused. I obviously do everything that I can in situations where there aren't lawyers, but I'm limited as a judge. I can only do so much. So that's just a little bit about what I see every day in my eviction call.
Real life. John Gallo, so Legal Aid Chicago's been, as the judge was just mentioning, a partner in both the current ERP program, but you're also going to be one of the main partners in the new City Right to Counsel pilot and taking on more extended representation in the suburban Cook too, which Judge Hamilton will be happy to see. But tell us a little bit about that and the work you're doing in both contexts and why it's so important for people facing housing insecurity.
Well, first of all, I was so blessed to have Carrie Hamilton with the Black Robe on in Markham, because her time and dedication to the work there makes a huge difference. And to have Chief Judge Evans to be someone who's accessible to us at all times to talk about the issues that come up. From a judicial perspective, we couldn't be in a stronger position. I'm not sure if my answer is going to answer your question, Bob, but it's the thing that comes to mind on the basis of the comments that have been made, which is the uniquely difficult nature of representing tenants in eviction cases. And I think that Carrie did a beautiful job of explaining the dynamic. So I was a federal prosecutor. I was a partner at a large law firm. And I've never seen young lawyers go through the kind of stress that they go through when they get thrown into representing tenants in eviction court. It is exceptionally difficult work. It is grinding, daily, difficult, emotional work where the stakes are imminent and the outcomes oftentimes are horrible. And then you turn to the next case again the next day with the same type of client. It is extraordinarily grinding work. So, the lawyer that Carrie referred to, his name's Tim Huffman, who has retired, I think 3 times. I don't know, Carrie, how many times he's retired. Until we begged him, pleading. Carrie begged, I begged, everybody begged, and Tim came back out of retirement and mostly did it on a volunteer basis. And here's the good news in my judgment, and it's really what Bob's talking about. If you can get a tenant in the hands of the careful and good hands of a lawyer who has some idea of what they're doing at an early stage, you can put the case on a path to an outcome that is fair. The cases that are disastrous are where people get an eviction notice and think, I don't have a lawyer, I don't know what to do, and they don't show up. And then an order of eviction is entered, and it's on their record. Unless and until we can reverse that and get it sealed. But there is nothing more onerous for a tenant than to be evicted and to try and find another place to live. Because landlords, God bless them, particularly the ones that have not the example that you gave, Gary, but the example of the large companies that own multiple properties, they track tenants to see what their record is. They do it both legally and illegally. When cases are sealed, they're not supposed to keep track of those things, but they do it anyway because they network the information amongst themselves. And if someone has been evicted, they don't have a chance of getting a property. So that's what I thought of saying, Bob, but I'm not sure it answered your question. So.
No, I think it stresses how important it is. Neil, we've put you've heard a lot of the resources that have gone in here. The Cook County's already committed more than $15 million to this program you heard about, and the city's about to commit another $8 million over the next 3 years. So big resources, and I suspect policymakers often cite cost as a deterrent to making those sorts of investments to enact programs like this one or other right to counsel programs. Your firm's doing the evaluation of both the early resolution program here, and soon we'll be doing the evaluation also for the right to counsel pilot. And we heard about all the other jurisdictions you've evaluated places in. Is there a cost benefit analysis that helps here in making the case for these investments?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So I think there is. The work that we often do is to try to understand from a fiscal perspective how some of this sort of system change that we're talking about, and that's really what we're talking about, is changing an entire system, a justice system, how that impacts a variety of different elements of that system, some of which we are otherwise funding from a fiscal perspective as well, whether it's city, state, county, federal funding. And so our work is often to try to understand and anticipate in those sort of early jurisdictions and in those that are actually implementing some of these system changes, what those potential fiscal impacts are. Because it's system change, there are many actors, many institutions, many agencies that can be involved. We often, every day, fund social services that are in response to, providing services in response to crisis that families are facing, often related to housing instability. And so we look to what are those costs that we are already funding. And so in many ways, we are already incurring significant cost as a result of that kind of housing instability. And then we try to understand if we were able to prevent that housing instability effectively, how would that change the necessity to fund the responsive services to that, and whether or not the costs that we're already incurring are more than the cost that would be necessary to provide whatever the system changes that we want to effectuate. In this instance, a very innovative combination of early resolution opportunities and full legal representation when necessary. So every study that we have done around the country has demonstrated that, at least as we anticipate, the costs of providing access to legal aid, and again, in a very innovative way here in Cook County, is far outweighed by the fiscal savings that would be associated with the system change. Now, again, you have to appreciate that that system change affects a number of participants. Some of those participants are, of course, the landlord community. And so there can be responses from the landlord community, too, as we impact that system change. Things like requiring additional security deposits, considering their business practices as well. So that's something that we need to also appreciate. Of course, on the other side, there's macro and microeconomic effects to the entire tenant and landlord experience and rental housing. So there's a lot of things that go into it, of course, in anticipation of that. It's also important to appreciate, as Judge Hamilton was mentioning as well, that by the time some of these cases get to court, they're very complicated. They're often the clients who are facing the most dire circumstances. They are facing the most difficulty accessing these systems. They often understand the process the least, and oftentimes do have valid defenses that they are able to raise, or at least significant disputes between the parties on both sides, between the landlord and the tenant. And so in those circumstances, providing access to these kind of resources can be the difference between housing instability and housing stability. not always staying in your unit, but sometimes finding that pathway to other affordable, safe, and stable housing as well, and providing that landlord with the opportunity to move on from that case as well. The types of those physical costs: homelessness response and emergency shelter entry, extremely expensive, of course, rehousing costs, emergency and chronic health care costs, foster care entry and the inability to exit foster care, student absenteeism and school funding, the general costs associated with community instability, which of course are many, out-migration, and the need for people to ultimately leave cities because they can't find safe and stable housing, also an impact to our communities. So again, these analyses tend to do show that those costs that I just mentioned, those responsive reactive costs, are very expensive and outweigh the cost, and we're already incurring them. So if we can prevent that kind of housing instability effectively, then we are able to avoid having to incur those costs on the backside. The cost of providing the early interventions and the full legal representation when necessary is less than what you're already paying in most instances. Again, contingent on effective and sustainable implementation. So there's a lot of questions around how we implement, not just whether to take some of these steps, and those are important in being able to realize some of those benefits.
Great, thank you, Neil. So John, I think you heard the case for why it's so important. You made the case yourself. But now that we've got the funding and the resources, there are some challenges to ramping up to be able to meet that need, correct?
100%. And so the first challenge is to find lawyers that can do the work. So we are ecstatic that the mayor has stepped up and put the city in the category of a right to counsel city. That's fantastic. But to go from 0 to 60 is really, for us, not possible. We have to, as you know, Bob, we have to find lawyers to do the work. We have to train them. We have to get, most importantly, we have to find supervisors to supervise them. And so that is something which we're actively doing, but to do so in a market which is tight, to say the least, is a big challenge.
We understand that's not unique to Chicago, right? Anybody else having a different experience out there? We'd love to talk to you. Chief Judge Evans, so we talked about legal aid and its part in the early resolution program and why it's so critical. How have you helped secure the buy-in for these investments from the county government?
Well, the most important aspect of it, yes, saving money and all of that, is we're moving towards a more just approach to problem solving. You can imagine how a judge feels when a judge is sitting there hearing all of the arguments from one side that has a lawyer and hearing virtually no arguments from the side that has no lawyer. Even if justice would reside on the side that doesn't have a lawyer, you can imagine how a judge feels when a judge has to resolve that case. The judge is tempted to try to put back on his or her legal hat and start arguing the case for the one who is imbalanced, but that would be a violation of our canons of ethics. So the system that we're talking about now, where all sides are represented, are going to result in justice and fairness and a commitment to that on the part of everyone who comes before us dealing with an eviction case. And you might ask, well, what is the evidence of that? Well, it's this. There's a high percentage of people who have their cases settled. But in addition to that, we've seen a 2/3 drop in the number of evictions that have to be entered by virtue of this case. The sheriff's office has reduced their evictions by 2/3. So we know it works. All people need is an opportunity to embrace justice. Even the landlords realize that this is better for the system that they have to embrace as well. So it's justice and it's fairness. That's what keeps the system moving in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Judge Hamilton, so think about lessons learned in the early resolution program. I mean, you mentioned all the challenges and what it's like. The early resolution program and expanded access to legal aid both current and coming. How's that improving processes and increasing access to justice, and how can that inform our process going forward?
So I think that early resolution as early as possible makes all the difference. If you're a landlord and you haven't received rent for a couple of months, you serve a notice, you have to wait a period of time before you could file the case. You have to know how to actually file the case and then get it served. Then the case has to be served. And there's the whole process. By the time people end up in front of me without the early resolution program, we are many, many months down the road from when they have received any money. At that point, all they want is an eviction. So the closer that we can get to parties early in the process, get them access to resources to maybe get money, get them access to lawyers so that they know what their rights are, and actually get them access to the mediation program we have to start talking as early as possible, makes a huge difference. The cases that I'm now seeing that aren't resolved through the early resolution process are even more contentious than the ones that I was seeing before the moratorium, right? Because now landlords have been waiting forever. They are incredibly frustrated. Tenants are completely confused because they think, well, the landlord got a bunch of money from the government. Why are they evicting me? And so when they come back to me now for a trial, it is, we're on high in terms of emotions. So I feel very strongly that the more money we can put into getting to people early, the better off everybody will be. And the people who really do need trials will have the space to get them and hopefully can get to me sooner.
Great, thank you. All right, Neil, we're down to just a couple minutes here. We could have had a whole program just about Neil's evaluation work, right? But looking at what you've learned so far in the evaluation here in Cook and in the other cities you've evaluated too, what's working, where's there room for improvement, and for the whole process?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And as you know, that's a question that's worthy of a couple of hours. I have a couple of minutes, so a few points to think about, and I'm happy to talk to people afterward. The early indications that we have from the data on the early resolution program are consistent with what Judge Hamilton just mentioned. It appears to be very successful at resolving cases in ways that are beneficial for the parties. 76% of the tenants that are assisted in the program right now in this innovative model of brief services and advice coupled with mediation and an opportunity for an off-ramp to full representation when necessary. For those clients who are receiving that early resolution counsel and advice, 76% of them are indicating that they feel confident they can resolve that case effectively going forward. That's a great use of resources, highly effective from a cost perspective. Also, 63% of the landlords who are assisted by the program, also receiving legal assistance by the program, similarly agree that it was effective in providing them with a pathway to the early resolution of the program. So it's working, right? This innovative combination of early resolution opportunities that coupled with mediation will resolve a lot of cases, and that'll give us an opportunity to focus on the more complex cases that really probably require full representation and have access to that. A couple of other quick points I would mention. Outreach. We heard this idea of unexpected messengers. I will lean into that. That's a really valuable term to think about in this context as well. It's an ecosystem. It is an entire system change that we're talking about. So it's very helpful to be engaging with the participants in the system. Focus on collaboration, focus on learning and listening. There's still so much more to learn about what tenants are experiencing, about what landlords are experiencing, about what the courts are experiencing, about what our community service, community-based organizations, rental assistance providers. There's more to learn, and we're going to learn that by coming together, listening to each other, and trying to develop solutions together as we implement, as we gather more information. So all those jurisdictions that are contemplating this, engage with those stakeholders, engage with the landlord community, engage with the landlord attorneys, the courts, the rental assistance providers, the other social systems. They're very valuable as you think about how the whole ecosystem can change through these kind of innovations. And that will effectuate sustainable implementation of these kind of programs that is more effective for the system.
Great, thank you. So I was going to finish by asking everybody, like, what's your one, if you were king for the day, queen for the day, what would be your one thing that would solve access to justice? But we don't have time. So, so it is 2:30. I'm going to call Ron back up here. Please thank our panelists, and thank you all for.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks to this remarkable panel. Let's give them another round of applause. That was really terrific. I just want to make one point, and I know I'm the only thing separating you from a beautiful day is me, so I will be brief. But what we've heard today about Chicago, and Neil made the point that while this is a tremendous program and is first in class as far as I'm concerned, we're seeing success across the country with early intervention programs, eviction, diversion programs. Obviously, the moratoria had tremendous effect on eviction rates, and the emergency rental assistance likewise has had a tremendous effect on eviction rates. But none of those were self-enforcing. They didn't. Congress didn't pass them. The money didn't go out and magically land in the hands of landlords or tenants. Indispensable to the success of all of those programs, and there are literally over 1 million households today that are in safe, secure housing that wouldn't have been but for these programs. But those programs would not have worked without the assistance of civil legal aid programs like John's Legal Aid Chicago and the other programs here in Illinois and around the country. So a key to the justice gap is to give more funding to civil legal aid. We need as many messengers, both expected and unexpected as possible. And therefore, we're particularly grateful for your having been with us today. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for being here today and what you do every day. Stay well, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.